Good morning. Good to have you here this morning. It's great to see everyone. Had a fantastic, great week out in Wichita for my first cohort of this 18-month apprentice experience uh, that you have stood behind me and are letting me be able to participate in. It is a 18-month course, if you will, conversation on what does Christian spiritual formation look like. And it's key because we talk, this is what they shared with us. Spiritual formation is something that Dallas Willard and Richard Foster, two brilliant lovers of Jesus, began to pursue about 30 years ago. And they wanted to talk about how it is that we are formed in the Spirit, but they talked about particularly how we had to be formed in the Christian spirit. Because the reality is that we are all spiritually formed. Every person is spiritually formed. But it's important that we make sure that we keep our roots and keep our connection with the Christian spiritual formation. And so this is 18 months of really stepping into what this looks like. This has been years in the making. This is the first time they've offered this, so I'm honored to be the first ship being sent out on this voyage. And I'm doing it alongside 25 other people from around the world. We had a couple from New Zealand by way of Thailand who are participating in this class. They are serving the people of Thailand with Wycliffe Bible translators, and so they are working with a culture within Thailand with these people whose language has never been recorded. It's never been written down, which blew my mind. In talking with them more, they said that there are 7,000 languages in the world, 3,000 of which have never been recorded, which just left me dumbfounded in today's world that is the case. And so they are working with these people, beginning to learn who they are and their culture so they can write down their language and then can help them to understand the story of a God who has created them and created this world and loves them. What a beautiful mission for them to be on. And so to have time this week to share with them. Additionally, we had a pastor from Brazil who came up, whose native tongue is Portuguese and learned English as a second language so that he could come and participate in this and be a part of that. And then we had Canadians as well, our brothers from the north that were there. One who is still resident Canadian and two others who have moved to be missionaries to their southern brothers here in America. And then just 20 people, 20 Americans from around the country, from Jersey to Florida, to South Carolina, to Pittsburgh, a friend from Indianapolis, a number scattered across the Midwest, from California, and from Wyoming. And so all of us coming together, having never met each other, not even knowing each other's names, and sitting in the spiritual center in Wichita, Kansas. And within 24 hours, to see the beauty of relationships, as this song talked about, of all the nations coming together and forming a sense of community, of these people who are pursuing the kingdom, following Christ, pursuing the cross that's before us, and leaving the world behind us. Just a beautiful week. And I have to say, it was an honor to be there as a representative of Faith Community. Because you certainly you talk and you share with the people there, and then the question usually was, well, what kind of church what's your denomination, what's your background, where are you from? And so it was so great for me to be able to share the story of Faith Community, and for people to come back through the week and say, hey, tell me more about this aspect of your church. I find it fascinating. Your church sounds so lovely, so wonderful. I said, you have no idea. You have no idea. And I felt the presence of your prayers all week as we were out there, as we were spending time out there, and we had those moments. I knew you were praying for me. I knew that you were thinking of me. And for those of you that weren't, you're a bunch of jerks. But everyone else, I really thank you for your prayers while I was out there. Can I say that? Oh, no, I kid. One of the beautiful things that they were talking about this week that we've been reading about over the last few months is about narratives. And the reality is this, is that we are formed, we are created by our narratives. That means the stories that we know, the stories that we're told, The stories that we tell with our lives, they form us. They shape us. It's actually the basis of our logo, the logo of three stories together, three narratives tied together. The top circle being God's story that is over everything, that God's story has allowed us to enter into this narrative. The bottom left circle, and you can see this on your bulletin, the bottom left circle is our story, our individual story, or also our corporate story as a church. And the right circle is other stories or their story. All three connected, all tied to God in some way. And so I felt like I was kind of a leg up already in this conversation as we came into it. But they talked about how we allow false narratives to enter into our life. Narratives that don't speak the truth, and yet sometimes they find their way in and they weave their wiry fingers into our hearts and into our souls and into our lives. And we begin to live or to believe or to practice these false narratives. And these false narratives, one of the things they said, the false narratives are these things that are inferior to the story of God. They're things that keep us in fear, that keep us ashamed, that keep us guilty, that don't allow us to fully embrace God's story and keep us blind to the reality that is there. And that is no doubt what we are doing right now as we go through this Advent conspiracy, of helping to remove those wiry fingers of a narrative that the culture, and I'll say the church has allowed to take on the story of Advent and Christmas and has made it something that is other than what it could be or what it was intended to be. And so I want to go to the text today, and I want to share with you a couple of stories that will help us hopefully continue to unwrap what this Advent conspiracy is and what it can look like for us, right? And there's a little confusion. You saw the Christmas tree in the gathering space, and you see the upside-down Christmas tree here. And you know, Christmas trees can't come out until after Thanksgiving. But we need to make sure that we understand this narrative before the season of Advent and Christmas get here so that we can truly enter into this story and enter into it in a way that truly glorifies God. I want to start with a story that comes out of John 14, and I'm going to read from the Message because of the way that it flows. This is John 14. Now, John is an interesting gospel because it's different than the other three gospels. Most of the Gospel of John deals with Jesus' Last Supper and then goes into his crucifixion and resurrection. In John's gospel, we have no story, as the synoptic gospels do, of communion. There is no retelling of Jesus taking the bread and breaking it and blessing the cup of wine and offering it to his disciples. It is absent from the Gospel of John. What we get in the Gospel of John as the pinnacle of Jesus' teaching to his disciples is Jesus taking his robe off, wrapping a towel around him, getting down on his hands and feet, taking the place of a very overlooked servant in this culture, and choosing to wash the feet of his disciples. And in this he says, if I am your teacher, and if you acknowledge me as this, and you have just seen what I have done in washing your feet, then you should also do what your teacher does. And you should serve other people by putting yourself in a place of humbleness and a place of shame in order to serve their very basic central needs, despite what the culture may say of you. So he's just done this with his disciples. And he talks about that he's getting ready to leave and he's getting ready to go prepare a place where they're going to join him and they're going to live alongside of him. And so it comes up and it says, he talks about them laying down their life and that they'll need to do that. And so it comes and he says, don't let this throw you. Do you trust God? If so, then trust me. There's plenty of room for you in my Father's house. If that weren't so, would I have told you that I'm on my way to get a room ready for you? And if I'm on my way to get that room ready, then I have to come back. And I have to get you so that I can live there with you. Already you know the road I'm taking. And Thomas said, Master, we have no idea where you are going. How do you expect us to know that road? And Jesus said, I am that road. I am truth, and I am life. And no one gets to the Father apart from me. So if you know me, then you know my Father. From now on, you know him. You have even seen him. And Philip speaks up, and he says, Master, show us the Father, then we'll be content. Jesus just says, he says, look, I am the Father is in me. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And Philip says, well, show us the Father. Are you listening to me, Philip? Are you hearing what I'm saying? Right? And I don't think this is so much of a rebuke as much of as you've talked with someone who you know dearly who just doesn't quite understand, right? Doesn't understand these things. And he says, you have been with me all this time, Philip, and you still don't understand. You still don't get it. To see me is to see the Father. So how can you ask, where is the Father? Don't you believe that I am the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I speak to you aren't just words. I don't make them up on my own. The Father who resides in me crafts each word into a divine act. Believe me, I am in my Father, and my Father is in me. And if you cannot believe that, then believe what you see, the works. The person who trusts me will not only do what I'm doing, but will do far greater things, because I'm on my way to the Father. I'm giving you the same work to do that I have been doing. And you can count on it from now on that whatever you request along the lines of who I am and what I am doing, I will do that. That's how the Father will be seen, for who he is in the Son. I mean that. Whatever you request in that way, I will do those things. So he says, look, if you can't believe that I'm the Father, then look at the fruit of the ministry that I have done. Look at the transformation that has happened in people's lives. And it's easy to look at the stories of healing and the stories of signs and wonders that Jesus did. But he also worked out marvelous things in conversations and in teachings and in sharing and in peeling back the layer so that people could see God more clearly. He said, when you see these things and you see people change the way they're living, those are the things that God has done. He says that I and the Father are one, and John's gospel actually opens up this way. And I want to go back to this because this is, when John opens his gospel, he is laying for us. He's putting it out there. He's saying, look, this is who God is. And not only who God is, but who Jesus is. And so John's gospel opens up in this very beautiful poem that calls back to a very ancient text that would have began in Genesis. That the Jews and the people that were hearing Jesus talk, they would have said, oh wait, this sounds like a narrative. This sounds like a story I know. And so John is brilliant as he calls back to this very old story that they would have known very well, and he reinterprets it in light of who Jesus is and who he was. And he says this, the Word was first, and the Word was present, the Word being Jesus. The Word was present to God. And God was present to the Word. And the Word was God, in readiness for God from the first day. Everything was created through him. Nothing, not one thing came into being without him. What came into existence was life, and the life was light to live by, and the light blazed out of the darkness, and the darkness could not put the light out. There once was a man, he was named John, and he was sent by God to point out the way to this life light. He came to show everyone where to look and who to believe in. John was not himself the light, but he was there to show the way to the light. The life light was real. Every person entering life, he brings to light. He was in the world, and the world was there through him, and yet the world didn't even notice him. He came to his own people, but they did not want him. And whoever did want him, who believed he was who he claimed, and would do what he said, he made to be their true selves, their child of God selves. They were God begotten, not blood begotten, not flesh begotten, not sex begotten. The Word became flesh, the Word became blood, and moved into the neighborhood. And we saw this glory with our own eyes, this one-of-a-kind glory, like Father, like Son, generous, very generous, inside and out, from true start to finish. And John, he pointed him out, and he called this is the one that I told you was going to come after me, but in fact, he was already ahead of me. He's always been ahead of me. He's always had the first word. And so we live off of his generosity, gift after gift after gift. We get the basics from Moses, and then this exuberant giving and this exuberant receiving, this endless knowing and understanding, and all this came through Jesus the Messiah. And no one has ever seen God, not so much a glimpse. This one-of-a-kind God expression who exists at the heart of the Father has made him as very plain as day as you and I are. Narrative. A story of life, that God and Jesus are one and the same, and that the source of those give us this life. A source that God overflows and overwhelms us with gift after gift after gift, and we have to choose to receive it, to respond to it, to take it in, and allow it to begin to narrate and dictate the part of who we are. A few weeks ago, I was camping with Asher with Boy Scouts. It was a Saturday, and they knew I was leaving early because I had to be here Sunday morning. And one of the fathers, is a lawyer here in town, he said, "So what will you go back and speak on Sunday morning after being out here all week?" And I said, "Well, we're starting a new series, and we're going to be talking about Christmas. We're talking about peeling back false narratives of the Christmas story that help us get to worship fully the Christ child, this God in the flesh who came, who gave." We have the Old Testament that is full of stories of God giving and giving and giving, and the people rejecting and refusing and turning the gift back. And so God decides to enter into our world and put on flesh so that we can finally get it. And so we're going to talk about how if we honestly worship Christmas, then we honestly begin to take on that image of Christ as one who is most generous to those who are most truly in need. And so we step away from the commercialism that is of Christmas. And he said, "Well, when you finish, come tell that to my church. And then why don't you tell all of Hamilton County that message, because that's a message we need to hear." And I said, "Well, I wish it was my message to tell." So I'd gladly come and share, but you can go and share. But there is this need, right? We see that the story of Christmas, as we enter into it every year, we feel out of balance. We feel off kilter, that something is just not right with the way that we celebrate Christmas and the way that the story is first told in the narratives of the gospel. That Jesus, who was God and had and owned everything, gave everything up to enter into this world in a very lowly way so that people could see and come in contact with the magnificence of God. And how many times in our lives, in the way that we practice Christmas and Advent, do we really emanate, as John did, the magnificence of this God giver of life in our rhythms and our practices and our behaviors and our mentality and in our generosity during this holiday? And what would it look like if we choose to do it differently? This week, the Brazilian who joined us, his name was Edson, native tongue Portuguese, learned English. He's a pastor in the city. And as I watched him all week, you could just see the concentration on his face in the sessions. And I asked him after one of the first couple ones, I said, are you getting it? Do you feel like you're following the conversation? And he said, "Yeah, I'm following it." He says, I struggle with when other people in the class chime in and when they talk. I have a harder time understanding where they're coming from and what they're saying. And you could just see at the end of the day, he was just exhausted. Like you could just see kind of the weariness on his face of thinking so hard and translating everything into the language that he could understand it. About the third day in, a group of us were standing around and laughing and joking and cutting up, and he was there in the circle with us, and he's not laughing, he's not cutting up with us, but he's kind of got this very curious look in his eyes. And we stopped and we said, "Edson, do you understand what we're laughing at? Do you get the humor? And he said, no, not at all. He said, I don't understand what makes you funny. And I said that my wife says the same thing. Which he then looked at me again with curious, I don't understand what that means. So we said, how about this, Edson? Tell us a joke. Tell us a Portuguese joke. And so he said, okay. And so he started to tell us a joke, and he started to translate it into English. And so we stopped him. We said, no. Tell us the joke in Portuguese. And he looked at us. He's like, you know Portuguese? And we're like, no, we don't. But you do. And so tell us the joke. And when we should laugh, just point to us like this. And we'll laugh. And we'll make you the best Portuguese joke teller that the Apprentice Experience has seen. And so he's like, stupid Americans. So he's like, all right. So he launches into it, and none of us have a clue as to what he's saying. But we know that he tells this thing, he kind of gives us this motion, and he kind of gives us one of these, and then he goes to this. And I know he's talking about a motorcycle. I don't know what the joke is, but he's talking about a motorcycle. And so he does this, and he does this. And so we laugh. We give it the real big gut laugh. And he continues on, and the joke somehow ends with like this, right? It ends with one of these. And he points. And so we laugh. And a couple people come in the room, and they're like, oh, laughter. Something laughter happens in a group or in a community. People are drawn to it, right? Hey, what are you guys laughing at? And we without missing a beat, we said, Edson's got a joke. You got to hear this joke. Edson, tell it again. And he kind of looks at us for a second, and he catches it, right? It's one of those moments where he's like, it didn't matter what was, he got it, right? The Spirit's like, just do it, right? So he launches into this joke again, and now we've heard it. We know the actions, and so he doesn't have to point to us, right? And so the five of us there, we're listening to it. 2 or 3 people who've not heard it before are hearing. And so he starts in Portuguese, and they do like we all do, right? He starts, and they lean in because they think they're not hearing him clearly. So they lean in, which is always what you do when you hear a good story. You lean in to grasp it. Well, as leaning in, then they realize they don't know what he's saying. But they're at that place where they can't now lean out because it will look rude. So they stay leaned in. Which then just becomes hysterical for the rest of us, and even, I have to say, for Edson, because he knows they're lost, and they don't know what to do. So we start laughing. And they're like, and they look at us like, you get this? And we're like, oh, it's so funny. And he finishes, and we all explode in laughter. Edson the same, laughs, and they just look at us like, oh, yeah, right. And so we say, we're going to go to dinner tonight. Tell this joke. And we'll come around and we'll laugh just like this. And others will crowd. And he's like, why? And I said, because you have followed this conversation all week and been on the outside, right? So let us, for a moment, let us put ourselves in your shoe and be on the outside of the conversation that is happening, this narrative that's growing within us as this community. Let us put ourselves on the outside where we're curious and confused and a little frustrated with this. Let us kind of experience a small piece of what you've done, and let's make you hilarious. Let's make you the best Portuguese joke teller that community has ever seen. And so we break into it, and sure enough, just the same way. And he's sitting at a table, and people come, and they lean in, and they lean further in, and then they're stuck, right? And they're like, here I am, right? But to give more. In order to hear a story, to relate to a narrative, you've got to lean in. You've got to put yourself in that place, but then you have to be able to understand it. You have to be able to get the narrative. And so what we're trying to do in Advent Conspiracy is trying to get this narrative of God stripping himself of his glory in the heavens and strapping on human skin and entering into this world. And not just showing up. He certainly could have showed up, just shown up on the scene as some middle-aged man, some stranger who walked into a community, and the story could have begun that way. But God was wise enough in all of his glory to say, no, I'm going to enter in as the lowliest of this form, as this baby who is completely dependent and completely in need. And they must, in their compassion, serve and raise and train me up and care for me and protect this vessel that carries this divine and eternal message of life and hope. And not just as any baby, but I'm going to enter in as a baby to a woman who is a virgin. And in that, she will be shamed and she will be turned out. And she will know then a piece of the experience of what my divine story has been as one who has come to share revelation, but who has been ignored, whose message hasn't been heard, who's been shunned. I'm going to come in that way. And I'm going to see if they get the story in that regard, in that small way. And so what does it look like if we celebrate Christmas in that posture, where we lean in and we hear and recognize the story? And then we go out through our lives and through our rhythms from day to day, embodying that story so that others may witness it or see it or question about it. And so this isn't necessarily about avoiding the shops on Black Friday, although I strongly encourage you to consider it. But if you're going to be there, then go as a host of grace and of mercy. In a place that is so full of tension and stress and frustration, show up as an agent of joy and of giving a position or a place to someone else, to see someone in a struggle or in frustration and to grant them a smile or to grant them grace or some encouragement. One of the instructors this past week said that she travels a lot and she hates airport travel. She says it brings out the worst in me. And she said about 5 years ago, God impressed it upon my heart. He says, you've got to be here. You've got to make this travel to continue to do the things that I've led you in your life and in your ministry. So be an agent. Be an agent of me in the airport. And she said it completely transformed the way that she travels. Then when she walks into an airport, she looks for those people who look lost or frustrated or confused or alone or angry or whatever. And she said she goes alongside them. She goes alongside a mom who's pushing a baby carriage through the airport. And she says, let me help you. Or can I get you, let me get you something to eat. You look like you could use something. You look tired. You look exhausted. She's helped an elderly couple who was trying to get through and nobody would get out of their way. And she began to walk out in front of them, coming through, so they could walk through without getting bumped into and jostled. And she said, when I've done that, now I look forward to going to the airport. I look forward to being able to enter into that atmosphere where I can be the story of God being played out. And it certainly opens doors for conversations of what I'm doing and what God desires to do in people's life. What if we saw that? What if we saw an opportunity of standing in a checkout line over the next few weeks as an opportunity to smile, to relax, to give the cashier a break, to thank them for what they're doing, and thank them for bearing the frustration of so many other people who've just come and wanted a hasty exchange to get what they wanted? What if we change our attitude? What if we change our mentality? That we begin to see people as people that are bearers of this divine image. And as we enter into this Christmas season, we see the showers of heaven just cascading all around us. The Christmas tree was used in its origin because it was seen as this evergreen, this always living tree and plant. And the form of it was an arrow that would point to the heavens to remind people that this is about God. Advent Conspiracy has taken this and turned the tree upside down to remind us that, yes, just as much as should be pointing to the heavens, we have to remember that this also is about God being ushered into this world. And how would our world and our narratives and our stories and our posture and our attitudes change if we truly invite Jesus as God of the divine and holy of all eternity and all time into the limited space and understanding of our lives? It would transform us. And just like Edson is being made the greatest Portuguese joke teller that the Apprentice experience will ever know, we will make God, the author of life, the greatest source of joy and comfort and of hope that the world has ever known. And being the church, the bride of Christ, we get to be the bearers of that story and of that image. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you for this timeless and ancient story that we have to share. And each year we have this opportunity and that we're invited to enter into the story. To be a community of individuals who are recognizing the beauty and the generosity of this gift. So, Father, I pray that we are able to take away the false narratives of our lives and to put on the true narrative of generosity and of God and of Christ as we come alongside the low, the hurting, the forgotten, and the needy during this season that bears your name. Amen. Thank you for being here today and for your presence in this place as we come together. May God be with you as you go into your week, and may his story invade your story so that others may come to it with a curious, awesome wonder that we've been invited to in this morning. May God be with you. Go in peace.